Hi everyone, and welcome to the SQLPipe Getting Started tutorial video. If you're not already there, I recommend following along by going to sqlpipe.com/getting-started in order to copy and paste commands while I'm explaining them. Alright, so let's get started. First of all, what is SQLPipe? SQLPipe is a free program that makes it easy to transfer data between databases. It runs on Linux, Mac OS, and Windows, and currently supports transferring data between 6 databases: Postgres, MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, Redshift, and Snowflake. In this tutorial, I'll be transferring data between a Postgres and MySQL database on both macOS and Windows. If you're following along on a Linux computer, the commands for using SQLPipe on Linux are identical to those used on macOS. Also, you'll see that it's quite easy to apply the principles of this video to transfer data between the other databases. All you have to do is just change the data system type in the configuration file. And don't worry, we'll get to that. The first step is going to be downloading SQLPipe. So if you're on the sqlpipe.com/getting started page, you can scroll down past all this stuff that I just kind of explained to the download SQLPipe part. But first, let's start by creating a directory to hold SQLPipe and a corresponding configuration file. So on macOS and Windows, the command for that is makedir, and I'm just going to call the directory SQLPipe. You can call it whatever you want, and then I'm going to go into that directory. And I'm going to do that on both Mac and Windows. So make dir SQLPipe, cd SQLPipe. Cool. Next, we're going to download SQLPipe. I recommend downloading it with the curl command, but you can also just visit the download page. So the download page is here, and there's a link right here that we're going to follow to get the correct curl command. Now, when downloading SQLPipe, be sure to correctly match your operating system and processor architecture. If you're not sure if you have an x86 or ARM processor, which are the two platforms that are supported by SQLPipe, you should just Google check processor architecture and the name of your operating system, and there should be directions on how to find it. So anyways, right now I'm on a Apple Silicon MacBook, so I'm going to copy this command, and that will download SQLPipe into the directory that I'm currently in. Okay, that looks like it's going to work. And I'm also going to do the same thing for Windows. And as of time of recording, Windows is almost always on x86. That may change in the near future. And if it does, I will definitely update this page. Okay, so we've now downloaded SQLPipe on both Mac and Windows. So let's see what's next. It's going to be configuring SQLPipe. So the next step will be giving SQLPipe the information needed to connect to these databases. First, though, we need to grant SQLPipe permission to run on macOS and Linux, and that's a pretty simple command. Sudo chmod is what I say, probably pronouncing it wrong. And we can then check that SQLPipe can be executed by running the following commands. So if you don't get an error and you get kind of like a usage help message, then that means that SQLPipe is successfully installed and able to be run on macOS and Linux. We'll do the same thing on Windows. Great. At this point on macOS, you may actually get an error that SQLPipe cannot be run because it's from an unrecognized developer or because it can't be scanned. And this can be solved by going to System Preferences on macOS, then Security and Privacy. And on the General tab, there will probably be a prompt down here that allows you to whitelist the software. And you may have to try to run the software again and click through a couple of messages, but you definitely will be able to get it to work. You won't have that problem on Windows or Linux so long as you're running as an administrator. Okay. So now we have SQLPipe downloaded and it has the permissions to run, so we can start telling SQLPipe how to connect to things. And we do that with a YAML configuration file in the directory that we put SQLPipe in. Let's actually discuss the format of this file before we start building it. So this is kind of an example of what the file might look like. The fields with the lowest level of indentation define the names of connections that you're creating, which you can then reference later on when triggering SQLPipe to transfer data. For example, the text on screen right now would create two data systems that SQLPipe can query, my source and my target. The name of these systems don't matter. You can call them whatever you want. This is just what I put for an example. And next, we have to choose what kind of data system it is, which has to be one of the 6 database types we mentioned before. That list may grow in the future. Then we need to specify the host that the database is running at, the port the database can be reached at, the username we want to connect to the database with, along with the password, and also the name of the database that we want to access. One notable exception to this format is Snowflake, a popular data warehouse, where instead of hostname and port, you actually need a field called account ID, which is simply the ID of your Snowflake account. I'll be making another Snowflake specific video shortly in case you want to see how that works. But in the meantime, if you're curious, what you need to do is find the link that you would use to log on to Snowflake and take this part of the URL right here, and that is your Snowflake account ID. And then instead of host and port, you would delete those, have a field called account ID, and you would paste in that value right there. Okay, so you need to go and find all of this information for both your source and target database and come back when you have that information, and I'll show you how to create the config file. All right, so I have gathered the information that I need to create this configuration file, and I'm going to show you how to use Vim and Notepad on Mac and Windows to create those files respectively. You don't have to use Vim or Notepad, but they're always available. Feel free to use whatever text editor you want. All right, so on Mac, I'm going to do vi config.yaml, and that will create and open a file for editing named config.yaml, and then press I to go into insert mode. And then I'm going to paste in the information that I've gathered. And you can see I kept the names, my source and my target. Those are the names that I'll use to target those data systems when working with SQLPipe. And I had to specify I'm going from a PostgreSQL DS type, stands for data system type, to MySQL data system type. And you can see the rest of the information. To exit Vim, I'm going to hit escape :WQ to write and quit. And then if I ls, I now can see that I have a directory, and in that directory I have SQLPipe, that is the executable file that actually runs, and config.yaml, where we supply the information it needs to connect to those data systems. Next, we'll go to Windows, and I think, yep, we are in the SQLPipe directory, and it shows the SQLPipe.exe. So now we will type notepad config.yaml to open Notepad. It asks us if we want to create a new file. Yes, I do. Same exact information. I can save it and safely exit. If you've completed everything correctly up to this point, so that would be downloading SQLPipe, altering the permissions if you have to, and creating a configuration file, SQLPipe should be good to go. So we can start the program with the following commands. This one is for Linux and Mac OS. And we get a message that the web server has started and it is now listening on port 9000. That's the default port, by the way. You can change that. We'll do the same thing, slightly different command on Windows. We get the same result. And SQLPipe is now listening for HTTP requests, posts in particular, that will trigger data transfers. Now let's briefly show the data that we're going to be transferring. Here I have a shell inside of Postgres and MySQL databases. So first we have a table called small table in Postgres, and I'm going to show it. This is a table with 2 rows and many different column types to show that SQLPipe can handle a robust and varied set of data. Not only is there lots of column types, you can see that they are filled with things like escape characters, so commas and parentheses and nulls, which required a lot of testing and handling of edge cases. It can actually even handle JSON and raw binary data, and even XML. And now let's go, oh, here's all the nulls. Let's go into MySQL and show that there is no table called target table. All right, so there is no table, target table in MySQL, and let's now transfer into it. All right, so we are now going to make a transfer request by sending a post HTTP request to the current running instance of SQLPipe. This may be a little confusing at first, but SQLPipe is both a program that can be a server listening for HTTP requests and handling them by making data transfers, and it can also send properly formatted HTTP requests from the command line. So let's open a new shell and navigate to the directory that we made. And now we can write a transfer command in the format below. So we have one for Mac OS and Linux, and we also have one for Windows. So here, the server host is going to be localhost since the SQLPipe server is running locally. However, you could send a request to a remote server if you wanted to, and frequently you will want to. Source DS name, data system name, will be the name of the data system that you want to extract from. In our case, that will be, I think it was my source that we named in our config file. And target DS name will be the corresponding data system that we want to insert into. Target table will be the name of the table that we want to insert into, and query will be the query that we run on the source system. So that could be something like select star from small table is what I'm going to run. Lastly, write type can be overwrite or insert. Overwrite will drop and recreate a table, while insert will just add to a table if it exists. Notice that Mac OS and Linux have a slightly different command structure to Windows. In case you're unfamiliar, these slashes at the end are just for formatting so that we can continue the command on multiple lines. These little upticks are doing the same thing for Windows. These are just formatting things and they are not necessary. Okay, so I'm going to paste in a command that I have pre-formatted. And you can see this pretty much matches. It's SQLPipe transfer. The server host is localhost. These are the names of the data systems that we created in the config file. This is the table that we want to insert into. This is the query that we're running on the source system and our write type. And it says the transfer was successful. And if we go to MySQL and we select star from target table, you can see that we have some results. We can drop the table and do the same thing on Windows. So you can see if we try to select from target table, again, it does not exist. But if we go to Windows, we can start a new shell and we can paste a command that I had pre-formatted as well. It's only slightly different from the one that we used on macOS or Linux. You have to use .exe at the end of SQLPipe because it's Windows, and instead of slashes to make a multi-line command, we use upticks. And, oops, I'm not in the correct directory. Try that again. And there you go. The transfer was successful, and we should be able to select star from the target table. And once again, our data is there. Just as a heads up, most databases require specifying target schema. So it would be a extra flag where just like target table, you would say dash dash target schema. But MySQL doesn't really have schemas the way that some other databases do, so we didn't have to do that here. Basically, if you're getting an error that makes it look like the schema is missing on your target system, like say if you're trying to transfer it to Redshift, try specifying the same transfer with the flag dash dash target schema. Alright, that's it for this video. If you have any problems, please don't hesitate to contact SQLPipe support just by going to our contact page up at the top here. SQLPipe is a new product, so we want to hear about errors that people are encountering so that we can squash any bugs that come up and help people understand how to use the product better. Okay, I hope to hear from you guys soon. Thanks. Bye.